bullying, the damage from a psychological perspective, it can leave the person totally disabled. It can leave them incapable of working. And until you've represented workers who have been placed in those positions, it may be hard for people to understand. But to think of every day, every minute of every day where you're at work, the thought that someone is going to come in and start pushing you around verbally, trying to make you do things you don't want to do, to try and expose you to harm that is far, far more significant to them than someone simply cutting their hand with a razor. You know, I had a client describe it as, because what happened in that case is the bullying was over such a prolonged period of time and was so extensive by members within the company as they closed ranks around the initial bullies, that there was nowhere to turn. And what he described it as is that as he would walk through that building, he said, imagine that you're getting hit in the chest by a truck, and the ability to try and breathe at that point is impossible. And that's how he felt as he walked in what should have been a safe workplace. And he was just panic struck at the fear that what's going to happen next. And it was debilitating, and ultimately could not walk across that threshold another day to have to experience that type of injury. And you know, we can see a cut on a hand far more easily than we can understand the injuries of the mind and that these bullies inflict. And that's why it's bad business from a company perspective, that sooner or later the bully's going to have to go. If they're wise, they'll do it on a more cheaper basis than wait till they face the exposure of the liability from the suit, and then they still have to terminate the employee that caused the problems to begin with.
Some of this is hard to catch, though, because bullies, I would think, are smart enough not to do it when they have witnesses.
Yes, that's correct. So then it becomes a he said, or he said, she said case, and those are obviously harder to prove than virtually any other case.
What would you tell the employee that comes to you and says, I'm being harassed by my supervisor or by my boss. I really can't afford to quit my job, but I can't take it anymore. What should I do?
Document. Get whatever documentation. Sometimes it's not just words, it's emails. A lot of companies have video surveillance of various places so that you can try and make sure that that information is preserved electronically as well, to try and get witnesses to see exactly what's going on. Obviously, to the extent that you have additional evidence to support your claim other than your own claims, it just makes it, you remove that sense of bias that is naturally going to be claimed by the person seeking damages and redress.
Who is likely to be the victim? Is it typically women?
I think the answer is yes, but surprisingly, there's a large number of men that are as well. And oftentimes, in my experience, men are even maybe a tad less likely to report it because they're expected to be stronger, and just sort of boys will be boys when they engage in that type of, you know, what some would consider acceptable banter. But it's not banter when it's one-sided and it's constantly done, and it's humiliating. And oftentimes it's one person that is the person that is exposed to that among a group of people, and you definitely feel singled out under those circumstances.
Sure. Why do the number of employees who work in American higher education report being bullied at what I would say are staggering numbers?
I think simply because they are more vigilant about recognizing what is likely unfair behavior in the workplace. I think bullying in the workplace is significantly more extensive than most people would realize. And I think if they take a step back and start to think about some of their bad experiences with their prior employees or their bosses, many would see that some of those are pretty typical of what we would see as a bullying experience that might have happened on a playground many, many years before. But frankly, we find it acceptable simply because we've got to work if we want to pay our bills and clothe ourselves.
Yeah, people feel they have no choice but to take it. Yeah. Any final advice for the audience on this topic of bullying?
I think whether you're the employer or whether you're the employee or whether you're the fellow worker, you know, the fact is that you should follow your mother's advice. Be good to people. Follow the golden rule. The fact is there's no financial or personal incentive to treat people badly. And if you have to make yourself feel better at the expense of someone else, then you really ought to find something else to do, because you need more help than the people that you're attempting to inflict the harm on.
This excerpt is brought to you by the Massachusetts School of Law, the leader of reform in legal education and the leader in multimedia education for the public. To view the full interview and for a full listing of MSL's programs, log on to mslaw.edu.